Hello everyone, dear friends. In the post declaration of IAS PT result of 2021, now for aspirants this is high time for taking calculated risk or going for the surveys. What exactly could be the strategies for clearing and cracking this second part of IAS that's called mains? And particularly today we'll be discussing entire aspects in general, but particularly our focus will be for PSIR as an optional or political science and international relations. This will be prime focus of this particular video. This was for long due, and then many aspirants were asking should be something, a kind of video which could be useful for making the strategies and particularly a kind of surveys. And this survey today I'm discussing about since 2000 up to 2020. And let's take for example, we'll be talking about under Western political thought. And one of them, one of the most important thinker, which is very much always in the limelight, and that thinker really is much practical and based on pragmatic approach. So I would try to move towards that, and that is none other than Machiavelli. If you just take a look for long about the questions pattern of previous years and then pattern for decades, almost like more than 15 years plus, Machiavelli's role has been very much prominent in being asked in the form of questions. This UPSC Mains 2022 PSIR optional. So today, dear friends, I will be purely discussing about entirely everything about Machiavelli and various aspects, various angles of it, so that nothing really remains left for any speculation, and those aspirants having PSIR as an optional for men's would definitely can score maximum to the extent possible. And this is where today we'll discuss many aspects of it. Let's first understand about this Machiavelli's perceptions before we really go for some questions part of it, various angles. Let us see what were the conditions during that when Machiavelli hawked the limelight and then appeared before the world community in the form of a mega political thinker. Dear students and dear friends, if we talk about as a part of introductory in this sense, there are many myths that got shattered, and that time was much prevailing of really monolithic united Christian order across prevailing in Western European society, and it was much pervasive in many states, or you can say majority of them. And then the growth of trade, business, commerce, and that made possible by economic development, you can say there are many sources of economies as it happens in every era of the human being, and that was and that era was not an exception. Dear friends, in this sense we would like to really highlight as to how when the time was really tough for Machiavelli for that era, which was pervasive, but then there was supremacy of much more religion, Christianity, papacy, and the religious discourse was much in the play. Dear friends, so why this being discussed before the questions being discussed? Reason being, once you understand the background properly, there will be no reason why you really cannot handle this. In all probabilities, you'll be able to handle all nuances what they ask from you. And my purpose of enlightening you through this video is to let you optimize your score to the practically possible to the extent. Dear friends, That time, when when the growth of the cities, economic development, or even the rise of printing press, many things were there. But then that was from a barter economy, and later it was gradually being shifted to money, banking, or some ideas which people were not lacking orthodox or traditional societies. They wanted to bring changes. They wanted to go for from orthodox to scientific orientation and configurations of where they used to live and been living for decades and centuries. The demographic split was in such a way, looking for a big change. But the billion dollar question at that time was how the change can be brought about. You know, for every invention always requires necessities, as necessities really lead to invention. And that time was also necessities, and necessities were they're looking for the right political thinkers or entity who could be really supportive for the public, and they are fed up with the ruling society, ruling government in many states of Europe. What they wanted means public. They wanted a kind of change where religion and morality could really find the second seat or the back benches. Not they should drive from the front, and from the front should drive, that is power, politics, and what were really public looking for that time, they wanted to achieve from all accounts, not to really spend their time in handling traditional ways of thinking. Dear friends, geographical discoveries and many emergence of centralized state with a distinctive national language, there many things were happening, but people were in the quest of crystallization of humanistic philosophy. They wanted to go for man temporal things, to turn out to be wealthy, good standard of life, development, progress, education. These were lacking. It's not that the society was not there to throng. Yes, it was there. But then the modern lifestyles which people were not aware they were looking for. Again, the million dollar question was how they could have achieved this. How the revival, increasing literacy, and human spirit could have made this possible precisely based on these accounts. Then we know from the dark sides, and we all know and remember. Stars always shine during the dark patches of the sky. Stars always shine when there are or there remain darkness. So is the emergence of Machiavelli, who really tried and in reality by writing, by manifesting many ideas into reality, changed the discourse of history when he got the limelight. And we'll see in due course of time when today we are discussing about different aspects of questions. We'll be focusing on that one by one. Dear friends, this video will be a bit lengthier, but then for good reasons. You will find really the vitality and the uses of this, which will help you to understand actually the background before you get the limelight and front part of this Machiavelli's mega writing in terms of Western political thought as a big thinker. And with this Renaissance, individualism or humanism, and reformations, the era started coming up. People started focusing on the human aspect and individuality rather than looking into deep practices of traditions and values which were really value laden, not the empirical centric. And empirical centric always gives you a chance to explore your own perception in scientific terms and find the reason what is right and what is wrong, unlike value laden or traditional centric. Dear students, this self realization and the joy of living in terms of good future really made something and gave a big hope for them in the guise of Machiavelli. Yes, we too have a big thinker like Machiavelli, rather in the form of Lasky, who tried to comment on Machiavelli or who tried to comment on in certain perspectives when Machiavelli saw big changes and when the Renaissance was in the writings of Machiavelli who portrayed the different characters of the state. Machiavelli basically he was and he is called the product or he is called the child of his own time. Why he is being called a child of his time definitely will come to know in this particular video. Dear friends, so what we are seeing today? We are seeing today the great aspect of Machiavellian perceptions and how he was one of the first thinkers who really took out political science theory from the clutches of, from the bondings of, from the walls of morality, ethics, religion, and he made a separate entity in terms of the politics as a modern nation state to flourish in. Dear friends, he was not at all in no way interested in religion and ethics because he was knowing the very fact these some terminologies of the society are really not goodful, not practically useful for the demography, and these terminologies, these perceptions really create a big headache, and he was primarily concerned with the power and the practical political interests of the state. His main focus was to bring reform, to bring changes, to see the state working for the nation, for the society, for the cross sections of the demography, not the values, traditions, and then all something which has and which carries nothing tangible and substantive for the human beings. Dear students, it would be definitely prime concern for the prince he wanted to advise of that time, of that stage, of that era, that the prince should work function like this and in different perspectives which you will see, and particularly government. Government's role should be for the protection of the state, for the benefit of the mass, not for the benefit of the state apparatus itself. Dear friends, what he talks about in this connection, interest of the state is everything. In other words, how can we connect what is at that time? How can we connect this with the time prevailing now? What he wants to say, what he wants to say basically in this connection is interest of the state is everything means what? We can clearly find out he tries to portray with the contemporary nation state. That national interest is everything for the contemporary global discourse in a globalized world and a globalized society. But then he wants to draw a parallel when it talks about that the interest is everything for the country, for the state, and nation is everything for the public, and national interest should be having a prime concern for that, and that is very very essential. Dear friends, Machiavelli, he is supposed to be the top political thinker who without slightest hesitation tried to connect and tried to find out the significant role of the politics with the state, not the religion. He tried to take the religion out from the domain of the politics and the state. And he adopted a clear cut line of distinctions between morality and religion along with the politics. Dear friends, let us see today not only that time, if you try to see and try to find out, it's not the question of that time of Machiavelli, but if you see even today, wherever, whenever, the religious forces, religious parties in the world, in any country, you see, when their interest and participation overshadow, then that really carry different perceptions. Machiavelli, because our focus is Machiavelli and we are completely confined to Machiavelli's political thoughts, what he wanted to say is keep the politics from ethics and morality or any personal and private practices. He said a particular prince of any state. Particular prince means he is portraying the prince, basically that signifies the government of that state. He says should be able to distinguish between what is right and what is wrong. Should be able to distinguish what is meant for power regarding with the state, what is meant for religion which carries no weightage for the state. So state is an independent entity and must be practiced with the perception of how best it can play a decisive role. Dear friends, what Machiavelli tried to portray again, there should be a dichotomy between morality and religion. If you don't bring dichotomy, what will happen? Here dichotomy refers differences. What dichotomy here? It means further a wall between the morality and the religion. He says because both the two have different categories and connotations. If you really mix each other, it will not get the desired results what actually the state wants for the benefit of the public. So what is important is, he says, for any state to govern, for any state to flourish, for any country to move on, the essential component is the state should be neutral in terms of practicing personal and state discourse. Dear friends, in this connection, let's have one question and that carries 20 marks. And that is very, very significant. In this connection, I would really point out one question which could be useful what we are discussing today. Let us see. Power is an end itself, and Machiavelli inquires into the means that are best suited to acquire. I repeat, power is an end itself, and Machiavelli inquires into the means that are best suited to acquire, retain, and expand power. Thus, separates power from morality, ethics, religion, and metaphysics. It says it carries 20 marks. Now, if this is the question of IAS Mains Science Optional PSIR of 2022, how would you address this? Before addressing this question, it's always advisable. Let's try to break into different segments this question so that the clarity comes out and then you are able to address accordingly. Let us see the first line. It says, power is an end itself. What does it mean? It refers to the power as a tool is such a big important terminology and that is so significant for politicians or for practitioners of the politics, where lies the central part of the governance, that is power. Power speaks volumes for any party. If power is there, everything is there. Power actually attracts people around from different quarters of the society, and it is quite helpful, and the term is very powerful. Machiavelli inquires into the fact, he says, actually for the flourishing or for the development of any state or any country. He talks about that time. Even that time, see his foresightedness, how much he was farsighted. He says, it's power basically which really rules the state in right perspective if it's utilized for the betterment of the society. But if it's misused, it can really create havoc. And he is talking about the European part of his own era. Dear friends, he says power is best suited to acquire, retain, and expand. Means what? If the ruling governance has the potential to use the power to utilize in the best practicable possible, if focuses on the right components of the aspects of it, the state can turn out to be a mega entity for the public, for the development, for the peace, and for the progress right across section of the society for everybody whosoever wants his or her life secured, standard of living high, and then wants to see the growth on the higher echelon of the development, can be really joyous for seeing power working in the right perspective for the society. And that is so essential, dear friends. Then how would you write this question in your exams? Let us see. As a part of this, you can start your answer with, because they have used the terminology power. At the very outset, give the heading introduction. In introduction, some portions about the question you will try to explore. You will try to move around the question and give a paragraph or few lines about the introductory components of it. The next segment of your answer should be some definitions about power or something as a part of explanatory note what power refers to and why at all power is so significant, so important for any answer to explain, particularly in this kind of situations. The examiner will feel that the candidate has really developed a kind of statecraft here, converting into personal craft of writing, which is so essential, and the candidate knows the terminology even essential to get explained itself. By seeing 1, 2, 3 definitions of the terminology, it will send a strong signal to the examiners. Wow, okay, at least the candidate is well read, and that really will make your answer somewhat different from others, and then you will stand different from the crowd, and this is what it requires. You are not supposed to be the part of the crowd where already thousands of applicants have been passed into men's segments, IAS men's. They have to now sort out or check out majority of them for the third part. So you have to stand taller than rest. After definitions writing, say for example many of you are not knowing the definitions of power, what will you do? Yes, here is a catch. What you all can do is you can rationalize your definitions by giving your own thought perspectives of definitions 1, 2, 3. 1 is power defined is being defined like this. 2, power refers to like this. 3, power is being explained like this. Not necessarily you need to attach any political thinker, but then the examiner will understand you have the capacity to expand even the terminology which is quite obvious from you in some cases, but then you are able to handle the critical situations even as a bureaucrat when you being posted somewhere in a district, something you might not be aware, but then for you the situation will not be turning as tough as it would or it would deem to be. Next thing what will you do is, it says power is an end itself. What does it mean? It means the next step for this question will be your explanation part. Now from here you will try to explain why power is an end itself. Why this is so significant. Everywhere in the world, if money is there, that brings power. If power is there, that automatically is attached with money. But since we are talking about not an individual capacity or entity, but we are talking about the state or the country, and we are talking about a ruler. A ruler is always the symbol of power, and here power acquires or symbolizes everything. Dear students, having explained power in different perspectives, you need to add, if it's 20 marks question, 2 3 examples you can add here. The examples could be from the book, the examples from could be from your side, the examples could be any relevant from anywhere, but should be suitable for this question. Dear friends, what is significant is, after giving some examples of power and explanations, you need to go for the zone where you can take from the international relations discourse about classical realism or theory of realism, which is really central and focal point of power. What is happening currently, not what ought to be. In the real kind and real time situations, so with the examples being portrayed, the next segment of your answer writing will be, you will justification for power as an end itself from Machiavellian perspective, and then you will try to explain it. Then you'll go for the next subtitle of this, inquiries into the power or power explained. How? What you can do is, at this point, while explaining, you can give some examples of some states of Europe. That time basically the Europeans or states of the Europe were not in very much ordered conditions. It is being said turmoil and anarchy to a far extent were pervasive, and that was something making the public or the countries or demography much fed up. They wanted to find solutions for a situation which could be fruitful and useful to take a sigh of relief. And it was here the role of Machiavelli, while he was writing on the entire governmental perspective or the state or the prince, he was much aware about the fact what is happening and how things are likely to go, because earlier he was the part of the system before being forced to take shelter in a different perspective. Dear friends, it's quite essential highlighting this. You have to go for Why power is best suited to not only acquire, also to retain, and not only to retain, also to expand it. What the author tries to say for the examiner is power is not meant for keeping idle. Power is not meant for keeping stationary. It needs to be not only acquired, retained, expanded from one point to another, from one areas to another area, from one state to another state, from one country to another country. So the expansion of power is the need of the hour from Machiavellian perspectives of politics. And that is very, very essential. If you need to move on as a big ruler, you have to keep on expanding your areas of influence. And that's very, very essential from international perspective not only, even global political perspective for any ruler to survive for long. But the question is not only to survive and stick to the power. Here Machiavelli emphasizes you need to be a good ruler. That's a different story in ruling. During the process of it, you can be sometimes very much clever also and can do a lot of unexpected things. But that should not go against the demography and interest of the public. That's very, very essential. So, dear friends, when we talk about this power, and in that sense, basically this power, what it talks about, it takes into account of the fact the state must be very strong enough to go for expansion, and expansion for any ruler is the need of the hour. There could be many varieties of running a government, but running in any form is not an essential factor to ascertain, to have surety for the success of a modern nation state. Friends, the kind of upbringing what Machiavelli got in his early life basically is the reflection on his personality as to how that cast a shadow on the theory, on the practices, on the write up, and what he came across. She was apprehensive about the state if these qualities, what he was noticing, cannot be written and found in the prince or the government of that time. He was afraid this could be a problematic for the state in the long term. Let me just take you back into his early life as he was born in Florence of Italy in 1469, and that was an era which was very much problematic and turmoil the entire Europe of his contemporary face, though he was born in a very modest means of family. But the factor, the perception he got from his family, particularly his father was a jurist, and it was also very ironic. He did not get very good education. He he did not get very much or high profile, you can say, the educated stuff which was essential to let him leverage his education to the extent which was essential for creating a big impact. Still, since from his childhood he was brilliant and under the direction of his father, though later he studied the Latin classics, particularly on Roman history. So he got to know a lot of things and then he tried to connect. He tried to come out from the medieval thinking, from the medieval perception. He was not as equivalent to as any medieval thinker, and he was away from that. In due course of time, when he got his education over, he joined the government of Florence as the Secretary of Chancery, where he really grew up. Dear friends, why basically his qualities are coming here, which is showing and creating a shadow for the power we are getting from his childhood capacity or where he served in the government. That really gave him these kind of perceptions which he wrote in his book. And he got the opportunity to deal the departments of war and interior. And in during the course of this correspondence or knowing about war and interior side of the defense, he also got diplomatic correspondence which used to pass through him. Though when the new government came, he could not take side with the new government, and for that he had to pay heavy price. So once he was connected with the government, and on the other hand he was away from the government. He saw both the two angles. So not siding with the government, he was put in the jail on the charge of conspiracy, and that really created a big and nightmare for his entire career. And he was forced to retire. He could not get again new job. He could not remain in the governmental position after that. And during his retirement life, he wrote masterpiece in the form of The Prince in 1513. 8 years later, he also wrote discourses. What do we find from these two big write-ups? It all really created big reflection. So, as a part of question writing, what you are writing the answer, dear students and dear friends, what is essential here is you need to have those qualities which could be really reflective for the examiner and could be useful for the examiner that can fetch better marks. Dear friends, he also talks about the emergence of a strong monarchy. That monarchy should be strong. Why? Because that will be useful for any kind of government who will be in the government, who will be handling with a strong hand. If the monarchy will not be strong, it will be much more problematic. So, in the sense of power, when he says, dear students, one more thing is here I'm giving you tips to understand, but you will write in your own as I'm giving you the tips. You have to pick up the tips from different angles which I'm giving in broad terms. I'm not giving the how will you write the answer. The exact line I'm not giving you. I'm giving you how will you write the answer, but you have to pick up between the lines and then use for your answer purposes. When he suggests about power, he suggests also the arrival of a strong monarchs who can really take care with the complete political power in his hand. Because what he says, if the government's hand is not full of power, it will be difficult for him to survive long and take the state to the next stage with the iron hand. So he suggests with the power concentration and with the strong monarchies, which can be useful to handle feudatories and corporations. And he was significantly influenced by the writings of Aristotle and Marsiglio in this sense, which he utilized in the best practical fashion to see the ruler in the strong, diverse front position, so much so that that can be really beneficial for the ruler to take the state to the highest echelon of power. And he also learnt the idea of separation of ethics from politics when he studied about Aristotle and the idea of a state as the highest organization of human and influenced by aristocracy and monarchy and democracy. So what is essential here in this sense is if you take the look of the profile of Machiavelli, and when he says he was the amalgamation of many things of the ancient, medieval, and contemporary phase of the society, and that was getting reflection on his personality. He was basically is considered as the child of his own time. Why? Because he knew the environment, he analyzed the surroundings, he unfolded many layers of the politics which were being really woven in different perspectives. The ruler, if he is not intelligent enough, cannot understand the layers of politics in the best practically utilized manner, which are essential for the power to go on. So, according to Machiavelli, power is meant for driving to further a different stage where the nation state can be taken if required to enter into a strange land for its own national interest. And he took a lesson. In doing so, the ruler must be remembering that there is a responsibility, state responsibility to handle the demographic situations, the public, the population. He has to behave properly with them. It's not that whatever comes to his mind and can make any policies that could be really something unacceptable. What he says, Machiavelli. Since he got influenced by Marsiglio of secularism and political unity of religion, he was very clear that religion alone cannot really take the state to the development, peace, and progress. It is the statecraft of the ruler which can really handle and steer the state from the anarchy, from the chaos, but to the best situations. And for this, Machiavelli really adopts some methods. He approaches made by him are very positive and negative aspects in both senses. If we talk about like the positive senses of his side, he really carries out the Aristotelian process from the particular to general, and his technique was really realistic method of observation followed by historical method. So not only he practiced, not only he saw, he also tried to inculcate his mission vision in real time situations. If we talk about his observation method, he was very much keen observer and always used analytical study, and he also tried to analyze history of authentication. He really went into the layer of the history and adopted historical method that suited him because he was mainly student of practical, not speculative politics. Speculative politics in most of the cases in many countries and in many states are really unproductive and not very conducive. He was the man, he was a thinker who was a real practitioner. He had basically not used political philosophy as a theoretical tool, but he tried to use it for practical purposes. His writings were treatises on the art of government rather than the theory of state. Basically, he did not write for the sake of writing. He did not see the state from the perspective of a Google which was opaque and which was not based on real time situations. Dear students, he was a realist who believed what actually is happening right across the world, on the basis of which he used to take decisions. And whatever experience he collected and gathered from inside the power and around, that was quite beneficial and useful. And that is why his focus is not what is the state. His focus is not how the state looks like. His focus is on the art of the government. what should be the technique and art for the government to run in a way which could be really beneficial for the contemporary as well as for the future perspective. Yes, his emphasis on the applicability of real terms for the art of government, and for this he adopted historical approaches. Why? Because he had studied, he had discovered and used a sort of peculiarity in theory. Historical method to politics comprises criticism of instances in history and also the positive parts of history. He tried to pick up positive parts. As we know, every angle has two aspects, negative and positive. If you talk about Professor Dunning, whose concern with historical method was more in appearance than reality, and his empiricism was based on common sense and practicality regarding Machiavelli. Machiavelli was very much clear about what he was writing and what the reflection will come out. Machiavelli never believed and then a lot and asked to practice about theory of divine law. He was knowing there could be many theories for different perceptions to how to run the government. But theory of divine law or any other kind of theories cannot be really helpful unless those theories could be suitable to promote the genuine causes to run the government. So Machiavelli, he was a great supporter of the government who could be really having a firm hand and firm grip on the regime. He also rejected the natural law. He did not believe in natural law and the divine theory because these powers were something which suited more for spirituality than running a government in practical sense. Yes, in that sense we can say that Machiavelli played a decisive role regarding power that is an end itself, and he inquires into the means that are best suited to acquire. Yes, thus, power from morality, ethics, religion should be separate, and from metaphysics. It should be handled separately and should be the epitome of all hallmarks for running the best practical government in the contemporary, also modern society. So, dear students, after explanations, you can go for the positive angles of power and then good use of power, and then you can go for analysis of it, and finally you can conclude. This is how your answer will be complete. Dear friends, now we would like to see Machiavelli as a political modern thinker and how best Machiavelli can turn out to be and why as a modern political thinker. Before we and I address the second part of this question, I'll come to this. So let us try to focus on, if the question comes, how Machiavelli is considered a modern political thinker. Yes, answer could be like this. Definitely, he was modern thinker in the sense that he used modern ideas. He used innovative ideas. He did not believe only in the historical method and went deep inside the layer of the ancient theories or the pages of the history, but also not only he learned from there, he also tried to practice and he also tried to innovate. He came out with many ideas which could be suitable only for the modern society, modern governmental apparatus, which could be useful for the art of the government. Dear students and dear friends, there could be some important facts and points that could be useful for calling Machiavelli as a modern thinker. One of them is he rejected the notion of medieval thinkers concept. He considered state to provide peace, development, progress to the people. And he talked about providing security to the people. The ruler should be the boon for the people, not the curse for the people. He propagated, he talked about. The ruler is and should be the symbol of peace, progress, development, and all round, and a symbol of harmony. That is essential what he taught Machiavelli in his own eras. He placed a great weightage to the ruling who is running the government. He rejected the fundamentals and traditional values placed by medieval thinkers in his own time. Yes, in this sense, he is also modern. He can be portrayed as a modern thinker, dear friends. Second aspect was that, see, look what happens in the world today. In many countries, there is a tussle of being secular state or theocratic state, tussle of being religious or being non-religious, tussle of supporting one group over others, preferring one interest over others. So if you see all the things aside, if the ruler firmly sees the human aspects in any country, if the job of the ruler is or should be to make the development, peace, harmonize the state, and bring development and relations kind of interfaith, that would be quite useful. This is what the humanity believes in and wants to practice. In many countries of the world, you could be seeing turmoils for many regions. That could be political, that could be social, economic, geopolitical. And countries are fighting for their own national interest and doing business and trade over the concept of humanity. Why? Because for them, these are most important segments to survive or to make the country modernized. But then who cares about the human aspects? Here, Machiavelli, though believes and places more weightage to the ruler as a strong one, but does not forget to bring humanity at fore, and that is very essential. Dear friends, Machiavelli in that sense turns out to be modern and more pragmatic. He for the first time supported the idea of national territorial state, and he discouraged and did not allow Pope should interfere and papal supremacy should be there. What is significant is whenever there will be a spiritual interference and intervention in the pragmatic aspects of the state, that will be really disturbing. A disturbing trend which could be really not stopped so soon. So the better part from any ruling's point of view is these kind of elements should not be encouraged so much so that in long term can create and cast a shadow over the development, peace and progress of the country. Dear friends, he said, stop and stop inducting medieval ideas into the modern concept. He was more of inductive method with the amalgamation of historical methodologies. He believed use history, read history, understand and analyze, but practice this in the form of what is essential from modern perspective, what is essential from reformation perspective and renaissance. What human beings like and dislike, it's always an essential factor for the government to look into, and therefore he avoided ethical factors and talked about pragmatism and said and advised pragmatical factor is more essential to make the ruler or the prince or the state to survive and to run in the best way. Also, besides this, he said politics should be politics. Politics should not be mixed with ethics and morality. When you bring ethics and morality, political power cannot be really utilized, and that can have a lot of problems. What is essential is there is a need to separate from each other. Unless it is separated, it will be difficult to handle. Dear friends, what we are talking right now about Machiavelli to paint him as a modern political thinker. So, what we are trying to dig out from him, these are the factors we are trying to take out which could be useful from your exam's point of view. Because your examination, writing skill, and in writing good stuffs are very essential to find the best reflection that can really fetch better marks. Dear students, his thinking of separating politics and morality really give a modern outlook because mixing to them is traditional and orthodox views that can be problematic and something medieval thinkers can really do this, or even those thinkers which could be relegated, or those rulers which can relegate the peace progress development of the state into the background. If we talk about features of the state regarding this, and which he talks quite often, that state should be like a secular institution and church should be subordinate to it. Remember, there is a tussle between church and state. There have been big tussles over this. The church used to tell, we are the superior entities on the earth and we have the right to rule over only. While the state used to claim, how come you are the superior ones? We are the superior, and church has no role in our the supremacy. So for running the affairs of the government and strategies and planning for this country. Church should take after religious aspects and they should not be mixed with these kind of political handlings. Dear friends, it's very essential to understand even today across the world. If you see about the mixing of these two entities together, that really creates problems. To dear friends, what you saw exactly about the political aspects of Machiavelli as a modern political thinker, you saw all these things, some attributes, features about him. Now, we have another important aspects in the form of a question. Highlight the features of human nature of Machiavelli. So let us understand before we come to the different aspects of the question of this video. This is also in the form of a question that's very essential. So how could we answer of this particular question? By giving the answer of this, we can really understand and underline. Though if we talk about many other thinkers, and one of them, Thomas Hobbes, was very famous about the human nature when he talked about the nature of human. In the same sense, Machiavelli also talks about human nature, but in different perspectives. And that he talks much in details in his Prince. As if you go by his writings, he says human beings are very, very unscrupulous and opportunists, selfish and wicked, and degenerate. Why he says like this? He all said because he came across about the situations. He says all these things because it's very, very essential what he found. The nature of human body, the nature of humanity is something not equal, not universal. The nature of individualism differs from person to person. Dear friends, he says that man is actually not as social as they should have been. And then, for their own interest, they can go to any extent to find their goals, what they have set. They have nothing to do much more about the benefits, values, ethics, morality, and advantage about others. Human beings are much more concerned about the fulfillment of his own vision rather than thinking about what others should have. He says that. He also talks about the property and relatives. He says human beings love their properties over relatives or families. On the one hand, if there are two situations, in one case there is the point of property, and on the other hand is the case of you can say relatives or families, the human being will prefer the first one, as he explains why this is so. Machiavelli says because this is the nature of humanity, human beings basically, and they believe in their own greed factors. And he emphasizes greed factors are much more important for human nature from Machiavelli's point of view. He says because by nature human beings are wicked and they can go to any extent to procure. On this sense, there are two views. One view says, and that criticizes the points given by Machiavelli about human nature. And they criticize like this. They say, this is not true that the nature of human beings are everywhere universal. Number one. Number two, they say there are many natures, many habits and traditions and traits of many human beings are different. Number three, they say there could be lot of factors which can attribute the good side of humanity. Number four, there are many points on the basis of which the critics say human nature being not universal in nature, somebody could be good, somebody could be bad. It does not really mean that every human being is bad or good, and every human being can be painted in terms of only worst. There are good factors and good aspects of humanity also in human beings. That is why the current world is surviving. That is why the world today, what we are witnessing, is something which are practically possible in surviving. In the absence of good aspects of humanity, the world will not survive. The state cannot really go ahead. Dear friends, this is something which can be in the form of a very short question, and you have to answer in a very short way. Then, how will you conclude this short question? You will conclude just in few lines. You will say what actually Machiavelli talks about the different traits of the nature of human beings. He has seen and came across in various capacities in his own time and in his own eras of Europe. What he found and what he saw in them. He wrote and he explained the real factors attached with them. It's not that he has added from his own perception. It's the reality what he found. If not, everybody is wrong, but it's also true everybody is not right. Majority of them could be found to be crook, what Machiavelli says and talks about. So that can be the concluding factor of this question. Dear students, then you can have another question, and that's also very important. That is about his theory of state given by Machiavelli. Machiavelli's theory of state. Sometimes questions come, explain the various facets of the theory of state given by Machiavelli. Then how do you answer that? Yes. To answer this question, it is essential to know the thoughts, what Machiavelli talks about the state. Let's have some features of it as follows. If we talk about Machiavellian perception about the state, he attaches the greatest values and importance to the state And next, he submits everything and he finds nothing above and beyond the state. According to him, basically, state is there to check the selfishness of human beings. If state will not be there, there could be a lot of miseries and problems for others. In other sense, he portrays state in absolute terms or at least very strong terms. Very strong pitch requires for the state to handle the odd situations. According to Machiavelli, state is an artificial creation and state was estimated to create and promote materials of prosperity to the people that is essential in short and long term for the demography, for the cross sections, and for any country to develop and progress. He never said that the public should be suppressed. He never said that the steps should be taken which are contrary and contradictory to the public. He never said so. Why? Because he attached great value to the human beings. Whosoever could be the ruler of that time or anywhere in future, according to Machiavelli, should be placed highest priority to the ruler to attach great significance to the subjects where he is ruling. So, the prosperity of people should be the main focus and main goal for any ruler, for any prince who is ruling, and that's very significant. According to him, a successful state basically is meant for maintaining law and order, which are very, very essential to run the government. But also sometimes question arises, is the ruler meant for only to run the government or is the ruler meant for running good governance? Is not the ruler expected to have good governance? And what the good governance refers to? It refers to a condition in which the maximum interest of the public should be taken into consideration. And the government should not function and work contrary to the position for which the ruler is holding. That can create a chaos and anarchy. Dear friends, though he favored monarchy and completely disliked aristocracy, but then if you compare in today's world politics, there are many countries which are democratic and there are many countries of the world which are monarchic. But you see the situations in many countries where you will find monarchic countries, barring few exceptions, are doing well but doing not well. What does it mean? It means they are utilizing their powers arbitrarily. When there is the question of freedom for the public to exercise their rights in their own perspective, then monarchy turns out to be absolute monarchic. And that creates big problems for the subjects. So, in this sense, Machiavelli has own perception, but then he is being criticized. Dear students, now what we'll do, we'll try to conclude this particular aspect of theory of a state so that we can further see how the gist of it can be taken. To conclude this, it's very essential. The state has to be well strong enough to handle all the situations. At the same time, this is the responsibility of the state to take care of the interests of the public as well. And dear friends, what we got today, so many points, so many thoughts and ideas regarding different questions, and we got the answer and strategies. And on this particular thinker, which is who is so important and so essential. So do share, do like, and then do subscribe if really this video enlightened you. Thanks for watching the video.